They hauled America's farms, towed across deserts, and outlived half the companies that built them. Some have million-mile odometers, others never once needed a rebuild. These are the 12 most reliable vintage trucks ever made. Machines that laughed at rust, shrugged off abuse, and became legends of durability. Number 12, Dodge Ram 3500 5.9-liter Cummins 1998 to 2002. When Dodge updated its legendary 12-valve Cummins to the 24-valve 5.9-liter, it didn't just keep the legacy alive, it modernized it without losing the toughness that made the original famous. This engine marked the transition into the new millennium, blending old-school durability with new-age refinement. Producing 235 to 245 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque, the 24-valve Cummins brought better fuel efficiency and quieter operation. But under the hood, it was still the same iron-hearted workhorse. With a cast-iron block, direct injection, and timing gears instead of belts, it was practically indestructible. These trucks became the backbone of towing companies and construction fleets across America. Many early 24 valves are still pulling fifth wheels and farm trailers 25 years later, often with 400,000 to 700,000 miles on the clock. Some were even tuned to double their factory power and still held together. Sure, they had quirks, like lift pump issues, but even that didn't stop their cult following. Owners quickly found fixes, and once sorted, the 24 valve earned a reputation nearly equal to its 12-valve predecessor. Number 11. Ford F-250 7.3-liter Power Stroke Diesel 1994 to 1997. When Ford dropped the 7.3-liter Power Stroke diesel in the mid-90s, they weren't just selling another pickup, they were quietly launching one of the most bulletproof workhorses in American history. This engine, built by Navistar International, became the gold standard for reliability long before Power Stroke turned into a marketing buzzword. You could find these trucks on Midwestern farms, logging trails in Oregon, and construction sites in Texas, all doing the same thing, working sunup to sundown without complaint. The 7.3's secret wasn't magic, it was over-engineering. A cast-iron block, forged steel crankshaft, and mechanical hydraulic injectors gave it a mix of simplicity and brute strength that modern diesels just don't have. On paper, its 215 to 275 horsepower and 425 to 525 pound-feet of torque didn't sound wild, but the real flex came from longevity. There are verified cases of fleet trucks surpassing 1 million miles with their original long block, maintenance being little more than clean oil, fuel filters, and a bit of luck. Diesel technicians often joke, the 7.3 doesn't die, the body rusts away first. One Minnesota farmer famously posted a photo of his odometer rolling past 999,999 miles. Another owner in Arizona documented using his F-250 to tow a horse trailer across the desert for 2 decades straight. Same engine, same transmission, same story, it just keeps going. By the late 90s, emissions laws started pushing manufacturers toward more complex systems, but in hindsight, that 94 to 97 window produced one of the last true no-nonsense diesels, a truck that cared more about outlasting you than impressing you. Number 10, Chevrolet CK 2500 6.5-liter Detroit diesel 1992 to 2000. Before the Duramax era and the high-tech battles of modern diesel trucks, Chevy had a workhorse that quietly built its own legacy, the 6.5-liter Detroit diesel under the hood of the CK 2500. It wasn't the loudest or most powerful truck on the lot, but for fleets, farmers, and old-school haulers, it was the one they trusted to get the job done without drama. Co-developed with Detroit Diesel, the 6.5-liter was a direct descendant of the older 6.2, but with stronger internals, better fueling, and a turbocharged option that gave it a much-needed torque bump, up to 440 pound-feet in later years. It was the truck for people who valued reliability over racing, and while Ford and Dodge duked it out for bragging rights, Chevy owners just kept logging miles. What made it so enduring wasn't fancy engineering, it was simplicity and serviceability. The 6.5 was entirely mechanical in early versions, easy to repair in the field, and didn't need laptop diagnostics to keep running. You could replace injectors with hand tools and a weekend's worth of patience. And when the electronic fuel pump did show its quirks, GM owners quickly learned the fix. Install a manual lift pump and keep driving. Fleet operators loved it. In the 90s, UPS, rural municipalities, and US Forest Service crews used these trucks for hundreds of thousands of miles, often in brutal terrain. Stories surfaced of original 6.5s with 600,000 to 700,000 miles, still pulling equipment or snowplows with nothing more than basic maintenance. And here's the fun irony. While critics and magazines called it underpowered, owners knew that was exactly why it lasted. It never pushed its limits. It just worked, quietly, relentlessly, year after year. Number 9. Toyota Hilux, 1979 to 1997. If the Ford and Chevy built their reputations in American fields, the Toyota Hilux earned its stripes on every other corner of the planet. It didn't matter whether you were crossing a desert, scaling a jungle trail, or running deliveries in the mountains. This little truck became a symbol of indestructibility. The Hilux story really took off in the late 70s and 80s, when Toyota's 2.4-liter 22R and 22RE engines proved that small displacement didn't mean small heart. These engines were simple, understressed, and nearly impossible to kill. They had timing chains instead of belts, carburetors that could be rebuilt in minutes, and a reputation for running hot, dusty, and under load without complaint. Owners put them through abuse that would turn most modern trucks into scrap metal, overloading beds, fording rivers, even using them as makeshift tractors in developing countries. Yet they just kept going. A 1985 Hilux famously survived a demolition test by Top Gear, where it was dropped from a crane, drowned by the tide, and set on fire, only to start again with nothing but hand tools. That single episode immortalized what owners already knew. The Hilux is less a truck and more a cockroach with wheels. It wasn't luxurious, it wasn't quick, but it was so unkillable that in parts of Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, you can still find 80s Hilux models running daily routes. Their odometers often stopped turning decades ago, not because the engine quit, but because the odometer did. The secret? Simplicity. No turbos to fail, no electronics to fry, and no design meant for planned obsolescence. It was built when Toyota engineers prioritized duty over design. A truck that could survive everything except retirement. Number 8. Mazda B Series, 1982 to 1993. While Toyota's Hilux gets most of the glory, the Mazda B Series quietly built its own cult following for one reason: they just wouldn't quit. These compact pickups were simple, rugged, and ridiculously overbuilt for their size, earning loyal fans from small businesses to young DIY mechanics who couldn't kill them if they tried. The B2200 and B2600 models featured iron block 4-cylinders that were nearly indestructible. No timing chains to stretch, no computers to fry, just clean, honest engineering. They didn't make much power, around 85 to 120 horsepower, but what they lacked in speed, they made up for in stamina. Owners regularly reported 300,000 to 500,000 miles, often using them as shop trucks, delivery rigs, or weekend haulers long after newer models had given up. And because Mazda engineered these alongside Ford, which rebadged them as Ford Couriers and later Rangers, parts were cheap and universal, another reason they refused to die. Even today, you'll find these little Mazdas running in Central and South America, hauling goods decades after rolling off the line. Rust takes them faster than the engines do. Number 7. Dodge Ram 2500, 5.9-liter Cummins 12-valve diesel, 1989 to 1998. When Dodge teamed up with Cummins in the late 80s, it changed the entire pickup game. Until then, heavy-duty diesels belonged to tractors and semis, not consumer trucks. But the 5.9-liter 12-valve Cummins turned the Dodge Ram 2500 into a legend overnight. The formula was simple: put a medium-duty industrial engine into a pickup body and watch it outlast everything else on the road. This inline-six beast wasn't designed for comfort, it was designed for longevity. Cast iron block, forged steel crankshaft, direct mechanical injection, and zero electronics meant fewer things to break and more miles between rebuilds. The numbers weren't flashy: 160 to 215 horsepower and 400 to 440 pound-feet of torque, but they were honest. What made it special wasn't speed, it was staying power. Many of these engines easily surpassed 500,000 to 1 million miles without ever being opened. Some even outlived the trucks they powered, getting swapped into new chassis just to keep working. Ask any old school diesel tech and they'll tell you that 12-valve, it's the AK-47 of engines. Simple, reliable, unstoppable. You could run dirty fuel, miss an oil change, or leave it idling for hours. It didn't care. This thing was built to work like a piece of farm equipment, and owners treated it that way. In the early 90s, ranchers and tow operators started choosing Rams purely because of that Cummins badge. It gave Dodge something they'd never had before: a reputation for endurance. And decades later, you can still find these trucks on job sites, hauling, plowing, or rolling coal down back roads like it's 1995. Number 6. Chevrolet C10 small block V8, 1967 to 1972. Back in the late 60s, the Chevy C10 wasn't trying to be fancy. It was trying to be forever. This was the golden age of American truck design, when style met substance, and under the hood sat one of the most bulletproof engines ever made, the Chevrolet small block V8. From the 283 to the 350 cubic inch variants, these engines defined reliability for an entire generation. They were simple, forgiving, and endlessly rebuildable. Farmers loved them, mechanics worshipped them, and backyard tinkerers could tear one down, swap a cam, and have it running again by Sunday night. The C10's chassis itself was just as tough. Body on frame, rear wheel drive, leaf springs in back, and enough steel to shrug off decades of hard labor. These trucks weren't babied, they were beaten daily, hauling lumber, towing boats, hauling hay, and somehow they still made it home. But what really set the C10 apart was longevity by design. The small block engine's low compression ratios and cast iron construction meant it didn't stress itself, even after hundreds of thousands of miles. Many C10s were passed down through families, not because they were collector's items back then, but because they simply refused to die. Even today, you'll find these late 60s and early 70s C10s running around small towns and farm roads, often with the original engine ticking over smoothly. Some have been restored, some still wear their work scars proudly, but most share one trait: they start every time. Number 5. Land Rover Defender 110, 1983 to 2006. While American trucks ruled farms and highways across the Atlantic, the Land Rover Defender 110 became the go-to machine for anyone who needed to cross terrain that barely qualified as Earth. From African savannas to Australian outback trails, this boxy British brute built a reputation for one thing: you could depend on it when your life depended on it. The Defender 110's magic came from its overbuilt simplicity. Its ladder frame, aluminum body panels, and leaf spring suspension weren't glamorous, but they were brutally effective. And under the hood, you could find engines like the 2.5-liter 200 TDI and 300 TDI diesels, known for one thing: unreal durability. These inline fours produce modest power, around 110 horsepower, but torque was everything. And with proper care, many have run 500,000 to over 1 million kilometers without needing a rebuild. What made them special wasn't speed, it was their ability to survive neglect. Owners have famously driven them across continents, repairing them with basic tools and parts scavenged from other vehicles. In war zones, remote jungles, and desert crossings, the Defender earned its place as the mechanical equivalent of a mountain goat: slow, steady, and unstoppable. Even decades later, it's not uncommon to find a Defender still hauling gear for safari operators or rescue teams. Many are on their third or fourth bodies, but still running the original engine and gearbox. That's not just reliability, that's legacy in motion. Sure, it rattled, it leaked, it wasn't comfortable, but it didn't matter. When everything else failed, the Defender 110 kept crawling forward. Number 4. Toyota Tacoma 1995 to 2004. Back when trucks were still built with purpose, not pixels, the Toyota Tacoma became a quiet legend. It didn't scream for attention, didn't chase horsepower wars. It just showed up every day and outlasted the hype. Under the hood sat Toyota's unsung hero, the 3.4-liter 5 VZF EV6. It wasn't flashy, but it was the kind of engine you trusted with your life. Cast iron block, forged crank, timing belt system so dependable it almost became folklore. Rated for around 190 horsepower, it was modest on paper, but the real story was the odometer. These trucks didn't stop at 100,000 miles. They started their lives there. Owners didn't brag, they bonded. Mechanics knew them by heart, and around every trailhead, desert camp, or fishing dock, someone would point and say, "Is that thing still running?" The answer was always yes. Many Tacomas from the late 90s are still daily drivers, still climbing forest roads, still humming along like it's 2003. One owner in Washington state famously rolled past 750,000 miles on his original engine. No rebuilds, no drama. And he wasn't an outlier. Thousands of these 3.4s hit 500,000 miles without ever being opened. The only thing that ever seemed to quit first was the frame, not the motor. In a world chasing power and luxury, the Tacoma was a reminder of a simpler time, when trucks were tools, not status symbols. It was Toyota at its best, overbuilt, underrated, and utterly unstoppable. Number 3. Mercedes-Benz G-Class, 1979 to 1991. Long before it became a celebrity accessory, the Mercedes-Benz G-Class, or Geländewagen, was a no-nonsense utility truck built to outlast everything short of time itself. Born from a military contract in the 1970s, this boxy brute wasn't designed for luxury. It was designed to survive war zones, mountain passes, and decades of punishment. And it did all three. Underneath its straight edges sat a ladder frame chassis, solid axles, and a mechanical four-wheel drive system with triple locking differentials, the kind of setup modern SUVs can only dream of. Power came from a range of engines, but the most legendary was the OM 617 inline-5 diesel, a slow, steady, and virtually unkillable motor known for half-million-mile lifespans. Owners around the world pushed them past their limits. In Africa, G-Wagons carried medical supplies through mud and heat for decades. In Europe, they served as police, postal, and military vehicles that refused to retire. In fact, many early 80s G-Wagons are still in active duty today, a testament to Mercedes' old-school engineering philosophy: overbuild it once and never look back. The OM 617 engine itself became a legend outside the G-Class, powering taxis in Africa and the Middle East that ran well past 1 million kilometers. Mechanics loved it because it didn't rely on electronics or delicate sensors. If it had fuel and compression, it ran, period. When Mercedes eventually transformed the G-Class into a luxury icon, purists laughed, because the original G wasn't about status, it was about survival. It didn't need leather seats or twin turbos, it just needed a key, a little diesel, and a driver who refused to quit. Number 2, Chevrolet Silverado 2500 HD Duramax LB7 2001 to 2004. When GM teamed up with Isuzu at the turn of the millennium, they weren't chasing horsepower, they were chasing immortality. The result was the Duramax LB7, the first in a line of diesel engines that would turn the Chevy Silverado 2500 HD into one of the most dependable workhorses of the modern era. The LB7 debuted in 2001 with 300 horsepower and 520 pound-feet of torque, numbers that crushed the competition at the time. But beneath the power, what made this truck special was its balance of strength and refinement. For the first time, GM gave diesel owners something that could tow like a semi, idle like a tractor, and still start up every cold morning without complaint. The engine's cast iron block, forged steel crank, and aluminum heads gave it a perfect mix of durability and efficiency. And paired with the legendary Allison 1000 transmission, it became a combo so bulletproof that some fleets ran them for over 1 million miles before even touching the bottom end. Yes, the early LB7s had a known weak spot, injectors prone to cracking, but owners learned the fix fast, and once replaced, these engines ran like they were carved from granite. Ask any diesel mechanic what engine started GM's comeback in the heavy-duty wars, and they'll tell you the LB7 saved the bow tie. Even today, you'll find these early 2000s Silverados plowing snow, towing RVs, or hauling trailers across America, their odometers spinning past 500,000 miles, still running smooth. For a truck that debuted over 20 years ago, that's not just longevity, it's legacy. Number 1, Toyota Land Cruiser, FJ60 and FJ80 series 1980 to 1997. When you ask mechanics around the world, what's the most reliable truck ever built? The conversation usually ends with 2 words: Land Cruiser. For decades, Toyota's flagship off-roader has been the standard of durability, but the FJ60 and FJ80 generations, built from the early 80s through the late 90s, represent the peak, the era when the Land Cruiser wasn't a luxury badge, but a mechanical promise. No matter where you were, it would get you home. The FJ60 carried the bulletproof 2F and 3F inline-6 gasoline engines, while later FJ80s introduced the near-immortal 1HZ and 1HD diesel series. These engines were overbuilt to an absurd degree, thick cast iron blocks, low compression, and conservative tuning that prioritized longevity over power. The result? Trucks regularly clocking 400,000, 600,000, even 1 million kilometers, still running their original internals. From the dunes of the Sahara to the jungles of South America, Land Cruisers became the vehicle of choice for explorers, missionaries, and NGOs, not because they were flashy, but because failure simply wasn't an option. In places without mechanics, without parts, without roads, the Land Cruiser thrived. Stories of their endurance have become legend. FJ80s hauling relief supplies in Africa since the 90s, still on the job. Australian overlanders taking 30-year-old cruisers across the outback without a hiccup, and fleets of them still in use by the United Nations decades after production ended.